The moment the night began, there was already a strange kind of tension in the air, the kind that people feel but cannot explain, the kind that makes them sit a little closer to the screen and pay more attention because something unusual seems to be waiting just outside the frame. The backstage hall of the award show was glowing with soft golden lights, the kind that warmed the walls and seemed to stretch every shadow longer than normal. People moved around with calm urgency, carrying clipboards, fixing microphones, guiding actors and presenters from one room to another. But even with all that usual noise, there was a quiet energy that made the whole place feel different. And right in the middle of that quiet, Keanu Reeves stood alone beside a tall curtain, his expression calm but deeper than usual, as if his mind was pulling him toward a single thought that refused to leave him alone. Many of the crew members noticed that he kept glancing toward one hallway, the one that led to the dressing rooms, but no one said anything. People respected Keanu because he always moved with kindness and quiet humility, never making anyone feel small, never asking for special treatment, always showing gratitude even in the most stressful moments. But tonight, something in his eyes made it seem like he was preparing himself for something more emotional than the performance he would give on stage later. The way he breathed, slow and thoughtful, made him look like he was going through a moment only he could feel, and that quiet internal conflict was strong enough that even the air around him felt heavier. Meanwhile, Sandra Bullock was sitting in her dressing room just a few steps away, her hands resting on her lap, her thoughts drifting between calm and restless waves. She had smiled through every rehearsal, greeted every staff member with warmth, and responded with patience each time someone adjusted her microphone or her dress. Still, she felt something inside her chest that had nothing to do with rehearsals or nerves. She felt a memory, one that returned whenever life became too loud, pushing her to reflect on the people who stayed with her through different seasons of her life. And Keanu was one of those people. He had been a steady presence for years, someone who listened without judgment and supported without noise. But tonight she felt something else, something heavier, as if the universe was trying to whisper something to her through the walls, reminding her that certain connections do not fade, even when time tries to soften them. As she sat silently, a small knock sounded on her door, breaking the stillness. A staff member peeked in to remind her she would be needed backstage soon. She nodded gently, thanked them, and stood up, smoothing her dress with slow, long strokes. When she stepped into the hallway, she did not expect to see Keanu standing only a few feet away. He had not been there during rehearsals, at least not in this specific area, and the sight of him alone by the curtain made her pause for a second. He looked up the moment he sensed movement, and their eyes met in a warm but slightly intense exchange that carried years of unspoken feelings. Without thinking, she smiled, the same soft smile that always reached her eyes when she saw him. He returned that smile, but there was something extra in his expression tonight, something fragile layered beneath his steady calm. That small detail pulled her attention more strongly than she expected. She walked closer, slow enough that she could watch his face change with each step, and when she finally reached him, the energy between them shifted so naturally that it felt like the hallway shrank, leaving only the two of them in a quiet pocket of time. "You're early," she said gently, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "Couldn't stay in the green room," he replied, but the tone behind his words carried more weight than the sentence itself. She knew him well enough to recognize when something deeper was happening behind his quiet exterior. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with more focus. "Are you all right?" He took a slow breath, the kind people take when they are trying to decide if they should say something or keep it inside. Then he looked at her with the kind of honesty that only comes when the heart wants to speak even if the mind is unsure. "I needed to see you before the show starts." Those words alone were enough to make her chest tighten gently, not in fear but in a strange, warm tension that came whenever moments were about to shift into something meaningful. She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice. "Why? Did something happen?" Keanu hesitated, and that hesitation was almost as powerful as anything he could have said. It was rare to see him struggle to find words, rare to watch him search for the right way to express something that clearly mattered to him. He rubbed the back of his hand slowly, a small gesture that revealed nervousness he rarely showed, especially in public spaces. His eyes softened when he looked at her again, and she felt that familiar sense of calm he always brought, but beneath it was something new, something vulnerable. "Sandra," he said slowly, almost like a whisper, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, and I'm not sure if I should say it now or if I should wait until after the show, but I don't want to miss the moment again. The hallway noise faded for her. She did not hear footsteps anymore, did not notice the distant voices, did not even feel the lights above her. All she could feel was the shift happening between them, the quiet charge in the air created by a truth trying to find its way into the open. She swallowed gently, her heart steady but aware. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice careful but warm. He looked around briefly, not because he was afraid of being seen, but because he wanted to choose a space where his words would not be rushed by the noise of the production. He took a small step forward, closing the distance between them just a little more, enough for her to feel the sincerity in his presence. She watched his eyes, and that was when she noticed it. A softness mixed with an internal storm. A combination she had seen only once before, years ago, when he was going through something difficult but still found room to care for others. "Over the years," he began, "I've had moments when I wanted to tell you something important, but life moved fast, projects came and went, and I convinced myself that timing wasn't right. But tonight feels different, and I don't want to keep it inside anymore." She felt her breathing shift, becoming deeper without her control. She did not know what he was going to say, but she felt that familiar emotional weight her body carried whenever Keanu opened the door to something honest and personal. She leaned slightly toward him, not intentionally, but because her heart responded faster than her thoughts. "Keanu, what is it?" He stared at her for a moment, as if memorizing her expression before he spoke. Then he slowly leaned closer, careful and gentle, making sure the moment stayed between them even though cameras and crew members were nearby. He moved close enough that his voice came out as a soft whisper, the kind that carried emotion even before the meaning of the words surfaced. And what he said made Sandra freeze. She blinked, shocked, her breath caught in her throat, and the world around them stopped moving. Whatever he whispered wasn't loud enough for anyone else to hear, but the effect it had on her was instant and unmistakable. Her hands slowly lifted toward her chest, her eyes growing softer and wider at the same time, and a single breath escaped her lips as if she had been holding something inside for too long. Keanu stepped back slightly after whispering, giving her space, but the deep emotion in her eyes made him instantly regret pulling away. She looked at him as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted, as though something she never expected to hear tonight had opened a quiet storm inside her heart. He opened his mouth to say something else, to offer explanation or comfort, but before he could speak, a stage manager rushed down the hallway calling their names urgently. "Keanu, Sandra, we need you both backstage now. Cue time is in 60 seconds. The spell broke, but not completely. Sandra looked at Keanu again, her expression full of questions and emotions she could not name quickly enough. He looked back at her, hoping she would say something, anything, but instead she took one slow breath and whispered, almost trembling, "Keanu, why would you say that now?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, not with the stage manager urging them forward and the pressure of the show pulling them back into the world of bright lights and cameras. But as they both stepped toward the stage entrance, their hearts were no longer steady. Something had changed, and now they had to walk into a public moment carrying a private truth that neither of them fully understood yet. Just before Sandra stepped through the curtain, she paused for a split second, turned her head toward him, and looked at him not as a co-star, not as a friend, but as someone whom she suddenly saw in an entirely new emotional light. The look she gave him said everything, but what it meant, neither of them was ready to face yet. And as the lights on stage rose, the crowd cheered, completely unaware that backstage, a single whispered sentence had already shaken Sandra's worldly applause from the audience sounded like a rising wave, bright and full. But for Sandra Bullock, the sound felt distant, almost muffled, as if she were listening through a thick layer of water. When she walked onto the stage with Keanu beside her, her smile appeared warm and steady, exactly the kind of smile people expected from her at public events. But inside her chest, her heart was moving too fast, still echoing the whisper she had heard only moments earlier. She kept telling herself to stay focused, to breathe deeply, to remember the script and the rhythm, but her thoughts were not listening. All she could hear was Keanu's voice, that soft, barely audible whisper that had landed in her heart like a quiet storm. The stage lights hit them with their usual brightness, flooding their faces with soft gold, and cameras zoomed in from 3 different angles. The audience was excited to see the two of them together, cheering and holding signs, some even standing halfway out of their seats to get a better look. Sandra had been on many stages in her life, but tonight felt different because she knew the expression she was trying to control was not entirely under her control anymore. Something deep in her eyes kept wanting to reveal itself, something raw and unguarded, and she hoped the lights were bright enough to distract the crowd from how her emotions kept slipping through the surface. Keanu, standing beside her, was calm on the outside, but inside he felt a similar unrest. He could feel the tension in his shoulders, the heaviness in his chest, the awareness of her presence next to him. He kept glancing at her carefully, trying not to make it obvious, but every time he saw the subtle shift in her expression, he knew she had not recovered from his whisper. He wondered if he had said it at the wrong time, wondered if he had carried the weight of that truth too quietly for too long, wondered if he had pushed her into an emotional moment she was not prepared for. But even with all those thoughts crowding his mind, he stood steady because that was his nature, to remain grounded even when the world inside him was moving. They presented the award with practiced elegance, exchanging lines as planned, smiling, responding to the audience, and maintaining that effortless harmony people loved watching between them. But underneath their polished performance, an unspoken conversation was happening in the small glances they exchanged. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. He looked at her with quiet honesty, though he said nothing. And each glance only deepened the emotional weight between them. When the segment ended and the crowd clapped again as they left the stage, the second backstage hallway felt even quieter than before. Sandra took a few steps ahead, then stopped abruptly, turning around as if something inside her refused to move forward until she understood what had just changed between them. Keanu slowed down too, sensing that the moment he had feared was now standing right in front of him. She looked at him with eyes that held more emotion than words could shape. "Keanu," she said in a steady but low voice, "you can't just whisper something like that and then walk away as if nothing happened." He swallowed gently and his breath came out slower than usual. "I know," he said softly, "but I didn't plan to say it tonight. It just came out because it felt like the moment wouldn't wait anymore." She stepped closer, studying him as if trying to see the truth beneath his calm expression. "But why now? Why before we go on stage? You know how much that affected me." He nodded slowly, guilt touching the edges of his expression. "I didn't want to hurt you or confuse you. I just felt like I couldn't keep it inside any longer." She sighed, the sound heavy with emotion, and leaned her back against the wall for support. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to steady herself, but the moment she opened them again, the weight in her gaze had grown deeper. "Keanu, what you said, it shook me." He took a small step closer, not touching her, but close enough that their connection felt stronger. "I know." She looked down at her hands, then back into his eyes. "You whispered something that changes everything. You know that, right?" He nodded again, slower this time, aware of the impact of his own words. "Yes." She hesitated before speaking again. "I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know if I'm ready for what you meant." Her voice was gentle but trembling, not with fear but with emotional overwhelm. She cared about him deeply, more deeply than she let herself admit openly. But hearing the truth spoken so quietly and intimately had pushed her into a space she had been avoiding for years. She had always protected her heart, always guarded certain corners of her feelings, not because she didn't trust him, but because life had taught her that certain emotions came with consequences she wasn't always ready to face. Keanu understood this. He always respected her boundaries, always gave her space when she needed it, always stepped back when her life demanded quiet instead of closeness. And yet, after all these years, his feelings had not faded. They had only grown softer, deeper, more patient, until hiding them felt like carrying a truth that refused to be silent any longer. "I'm sorry if I overwhelmed you," he said softly, his voice filled with regret but also honesty. "I never wanted to make things harder for you." She shook her head gently. "You didn't make things harder, you just opened something I wasn't ready to face. I wasn't expecting it, and the way you said it, so close, so quietly, it went straight into my chest before I had time to think." He looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts, then looked back at her. "I meant every word. I didn't say it for reactions or expectations. I said it because it was the truth." She exhaled slowly, staring at him with the kind of emotional clarity that only comes when the heart is finally facing something it has avoided for a long time. "Keanu, what do you expect from me now? How do I respond to something like that?" He shook his head instantly. "I don't expect anything. Not a decision, not an answer, not a reaction. I only wanted you to know how I feel." She blinked slowly, touched by the humility in his words. "You've always been gentle with me," she whispered. Even now, when this could change everything. He gave a small, soft smile. That's the last thing I want to do, hurt you or complicate your life. But she felt something tug inside her heart when he said that, a quiet ache that came from knowing how much he meant those words. She stepped closer again, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu, your words didn't hurt me. They just scared me a little because they felt real. He looked at her with deep sincerity. They were real. She looked down again, then slowly back up, her voice trembling. I don't know what to do with that. He was about to respond, but suddenly a noise echoed from the far end of the hallway, loud footsteps and hurried voices from the production team. They were being rushed again, told they needed to prepare for another segment and get their microphones checked. Sandra straightened slowly, wiping a small nervous tear from the corner of her eye before anyone else could see it. Keanu saw the tear, and something inside him softened in a way he could not hide. He wanted to reach out, wanted to comfort her, wanted to tell her she didn't have to rush to understand anything right away. But he held back because he did not want to cross a boundary at the wrong moment. As they walked down the hallway, closer to another bright stage and another series of cameras waiting to capture their every move, Sandra felt her heart racing again. She felt like she was stepping into a world that demanded perfection while carrying a secret that felt too heavy and too fragile to hold alone. Just before they reached the stage entrance for the next segment, Sandra stopped again and spoke without turning around. Her voice was soft, shaking with emotion. Keanu, does anyone else know how you feel? His silence lasted just long enough to make her heartbeat tighten. Then he answered quietly, No, just you. She closed her eyes slowly, the emotional weight settling even deeper. And what you whispered, have you thought about what it means for both of us? He nodded, though she could not see it. Every day. A shiver passed through her body, not fear, not sadness, but something more complicated, something that carried warmth and uncertainty at the same time. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see him standing behind her, his expression full of quiet sincerity. Keanu, she whispered, I'm scared of what this could turn into. He took one step forward, his voice soft but steady. I'm scared too. And then, just as she opened her mouth to say something more, a staff member pulled the curtain open and gestured for them to step onto the stage again. The moment broke, slipping away like sand through fingers, leaving both of them suspended between truth and uncertainty. But what neither of them knew was that someone had been watching them from the corner of the hallway. Someone who saw the emotional tension, the closeness, the whispered breath between them. Someone who now held a secret they should not have witnessed. The next segment on stage moved flawlessly, at least from the audience's point of view. The lights were bright, the music was lively, and Keanu and Sandra delivered their lines with their usual grace, creating the kind of presence that made viewers lean closer to their screens. People at home believed they were watching two confident stars enjoying the moment, unaware of the emotional storm moving quietly beneath their calm expressions. The crowd clapped, laughed at their small jokes, and reacted with warmth to their chemistry. But behind the smiles, both of them were holding on to a tension that kept rising with every minute. Keanu repeated his lines with precision, but his mind kept drifting back to Sandra's trembling voice when she said she was scared. He wanted to ease her worry, wanted to tell her there was no pressure, that he would never push her into anything she wasn't ready for, but the moment had been swept away by the show's schedule, leaving him suspended in silence. Each time the audience laughed, he felt a sting inside his chest, not because he was unhappy with the crowd, but because he could feel the emotional distance forming between him and Sandra, even though they stood side by side. Sandra, on the other hand, was doing everything she could to keep her expression soft and controlled. She could feel her pulse rising every time she caught a glimpse of him in her peripheral vision. She knew she should stay focused on the show, but her thoughts kept circling back to the whisper that had shaken her heart. She had spent many years building walls of emotional caution, carefully choosing when to open them and when to keep them firmly closed. But Keanu's words had slipped through those walls like warm light entering a dark room without warning. And once light entered, she could not make it leave. When the segment ended and they stepped backstage again, the hallway felt even more charged. The noise of the production crew, the chatter, the rushing footsteps, none of it seemed loud enough to drown out the quiet between them. Sandra walked a little faster than usual, hoping movement would help her breathe. But the truth inside her chest remained just as heavy. Keanu followed her at a gentle distance, not wanting to overwhelm her, but unable to step too far away either. But neither of them knew that someone else had been waiting for this moment. As they approached the far end of the hallway, a woman stepped out from behind a tall lighting cart. She was part of the production team, someone familiar enough to blend into the busy backstage world, but not someone either Keanu or Sandra had ever spoken to directly. Her name was Lily, a junior stage assistant who mostly handled timing sheets and microphone adjustments. She had been in the wrong place at the right moment earlier, quietly organizing cables when she unintentionally overheard their emotional exchange. She had not meant to listen, but once she understood the weight of what she saw and heard, it had rooted her to the spot. Now she stood in front of them with an uncertain expression, her hands clasped nervously. Sandra slowed down when she noticed her, wondering why the assistant looked so unsettled. Keanu caught Sandra's change in pace and looked up to see Lily staring at them with conflicted eyes. "Hi, is everything all right?" Sandra asked softly, always the kind soul even in tense moments. Lily hesitated, biting her lower lip as if trying to find the right words. I'm sorry to stop you both, but I think I need to tell you something." Keanu sensed the shift immediately. Something about her tone, the nervous movement of her hands, the way her eyes flickered between them, it all felt wrong. He stepped slightly forward, protective without even meaning to be. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently. Lily swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hear anything. I really didn't. I was just organizing the equipment in the hallway earlier. I wasn't trying to listen in." Sandra felt her heart drop. She exchanged a glance with Keanu, both of them realizing instantly what this might mean. Lily continued, her voice fragile. "But I saw you both talking, and I heard part of it." The words struck like a quiet blow. Sandra felt the air leave her chest. Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, though he kept his expression calm. Neither of them wanted their private moment to become public, not because they were hiding something wrong, but because the whisper Keanu had shared had been fragile, intimate, personal. And now a stranger held a piece of it. "I'm so sorry," Lily said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to tell anyone. I still don't. But I felt like I had to say something to the two of you first." Sandra stepped closer, her kindness taking over even while fear circled inside her. "It's okay. We know you didn't do it on purpose." Keanu nodded gently. "You're not in trouble." That reassurance seemed to calm Lily a little, but her eyes still held worry. "I'm scared someone else might have seen it too. Some people walk through that hallway all the time, and if anyone else did, they might talk about it." Sandra felt another sharp wave push through her chest. The idea of the moment leaking out, before she even had time to process what it meant, terrified her. Not because she was ashamed, but because it was too delicate to survive sudden exposure. Keanu saw the fear in her eyes and stepped slightly closer, not touching her, but close enough to make her feel supported. "Lily," he said calmly, "did you see anyone else nearby?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't think so. I didn't see anyone else at that exact moment. But later, I saw one of the cameramen walking down the hallway. I don't know if he saw anything before I noticed him." Sandra's breath caught. "A cameraman?" Lily nodded. "Yes, he had his small portable camera with him. I don't know if it was recording." The possibility made Sandra's stomach tighten. The backstage area always had stray cameras moving around, sometimes for behind-the-scenes footage, sometimes for testing angles. If one had been recording, even accidentally, their private moment could exist somewhere in a file that did not belong to them. Keanu exhaled slowly, his calm exterior barely hiding the intensity inside him. "Do you know which cameraman it was?" "I think his name is Mark," Lily said nervously. "He's new. He's been trying to get good behind-the-scenes shots for online clips. He moves around a lot with that small camera." Sandra felt her pulse speed up. "Do you think he saw us?" Lily looked down. "I can't say for sure." Keanu rubbed the back of his neck slowly, a gesture he often made when processing stress. "Thank you for telling us. You did the right thing." Lily's eyes softened with relief. "I didn't want something like that to spread without you knowing." Sandra nodded gently. "We appreciate it." When Lily left, the hallway fell into an uneasy quiet, and Sandra leaned back against the wall, pressing her hand gently against her forehead. Keanu watched her, feeling the weight of the situation settling onto both of them like a thick shadow. "This is turning into something bigger than I expected," she whispered, her voice tired with emotion. I didn't even get the chance to process what you whispered, and now there's a chance someone else might know. Keanu stepped closer, his presence calm but protective. We'll handle it together. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with worry but also with trust. Keanu, if that camera caught even a second of us, people will twist it. They always do. He nodded, I know. She swallowed softly. They'll ask questions we're not ready for. He held her gaze with quiet strength. Then we'll answer only what we're ready to answer. She blinked, her eyes warming with emotion. It was moments like this, the gentleness in his voice, the unwavering steadiness in his kindness, that made her heart feel vulnerable. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of the world that always tried to shape stories out of fragments they didn't understand. Keanu, she began softly, I still need to understand what your words meant. He nodded, and I'll give you all the time you need. But their moment of honesty was interrupted again when one of the producers walked briskly down the hallway, telling them they had 10 minutes before the final segment. They both straightened, their private conversation dissolving into the noise of the backstage environment. As they walked toward the preparation area, Sandra's mind kept circling back to the cameraman Lily mentioned, Mark, the new guy who walked around with a small portable camera. She tried to remember if she had ever seen him before, tried to recall his face, but the backstage had been so full of people that nothing stood out clearly in her memory. Keanu noticed the worry in her eyes and gently nudged her elbow with his own, a small gesture meant to reassure her without drawing attention. She looked at him, grateful for the softness he offered even in a tense moment. But just as they reached the corner, they froze. Because right there at the far end of the hallway stood Mark, holding his small portable camera close to his chest, his expression unreadable. And the camera light, a tiny, almost invisible red glow, was on. He had been recording something. But what? And for how long? The moment Sandra and Keanu saw the small red recording light on Mark's portable camera, the hallway felt like it had frozen in midair. The noise around them faded again, that same strange quiet they had felt earlier when everything changed between them. Mark was standing still, almost too still, clutching the camera close to his chest as if unsure whether to hide it or pretend it wasn't turned on. Sandra's heart began to pound in her ears, not from anger, but from the mixture of fear and surprise that rushed through her all at once. She had known cameras followed them everywhere, but this was different because tonight, something private was at stake, something fragile and emotional that could easily be misunderstood. Keanu stepped forward first, not aggressively, but with a calm and steady presence that made Mark straighten up nervously. Keanu had never been the kind of person who raised his voice or used intimidation. He believed in respect even in tense situations, and that quiet strength was what made his presence feel so powerful now. Hey Mark, Keanu said softly, his voice carrying no anger but holding firm curiosity. Were you recording something just now? Mark swallowed hard, his throat visibly tightening. He looked down at the camera, then back at them, then down again, his fingers gripping the device a little too tightly. I was just filming some behind-the-scenes shots, he said, his voice shaky. They told me to get as much natural footage as possible. Sandra felt her breath hitch. She took a slow step toward him, her voice gentle but trembling. Did you record us earlier, in the hallway? Mark hesitated, which was the worst possible answer. If he had immediately said no, they might have believed him. If he had immediately said yes, at least the truth would be clear. But hesitation meant he was afraid of the truth he was holding. Keanu watched him carefully, his expression soft but serious. Mark, he said calmly, whatever you may have captured, we just need to understand it. That's all. Mark looked up at them with conflicted eyes. I didn't mean to invade your privacy, he said quickly. I swear I didn't. I was trying to get shots for the online promo team. I walked into the hallway because I heard they wanted spontaneous moments. I didn't know you were there until I had already lifted the camera. Sandra felt her stomach twist gently. So you did record us. Mark exhaled shakily. I think I recorded a few seconds, maybe more. I'm not sure. The words landed heavily between them, heavier than any of them expected. Sandra leaned back slightly, pressing her fingertips against her temple as the pressure built behind her eyes. She wasn't angry with him. She understood that he had been doing his job, but she was overwhelmed by how fast things were spiraling. Moments like these were supposed to stay between hearts, not end up caught on a camera that could send them into the world without context, without protection. Keanu stepped closer, his posture never threatening, just steady. "Can we see the footage?" he asked softly. Mark froze again, clutching the camera even tighter. For a moment, it looked like he considered running, not because he intended to harm them, but because he felt cornered by the magnitude of the situation. I don't know if I'm allowed to show raw footage," he murmured. "The production team has rules about it." Sandra's voice softened even more, almost breaking. "Mark, please, this isn't about rules. This is personal. We're not angry. We just need to know what was captured." Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the emotional vulnerability she had carried all evening. "Please." Mark looked into her eyes, and something in her expression disarmed him. The sincerity, the worry, the softness, it all made him realize how deeply this mattered to her. He lowered his gaze, his shoulders drooping in guilt. "I'll show you," he whispered. But before he could press a single button, the head producer, Maria, turned the corner sharply, her headset bouncing against her neck. She stopped immediately when she saw the three of them standing together, tension clear in the air. Maria was known for being efficient and extremely protective of the production process. Her eyes narrowed with concern the moment she noticed the camera in Mark's hands and the way Sandra and Keanu were focused on it. "Is everything all right here?" Maria asked, stepping toward them with a fast, authoritative stride. Mark stiffened in fear, hiding the camera behind his side instinctively. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a subtle glance. They both knew this could complicate everything. The last thing they needed was a misunderstanding with the production team. Maria looked at their expressions, then at the camera again, and her instincts immediately kicked in. "Mark," Maria said firmly, "why does it look like you're hiding something?" Mark stuttered, "I'm not hiding anything, I just—" But before he could finish, Maria reached out and gently but firmly lifted the camera from his hands, a move she had done 1,000 times with equipment during emergencies. Mark opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat. Maria turned the camera on, her thumb brushing the playback button. The small screen flickered to life. Sandra felt her entire body tighten. Keanu felt his chest grow heavy. The hallway seemed to shrink again, pressing the air into a narrow, emotional space. The screen showed shaky footage at first, feet moving down the hallway, blurred lights, distant voices. Then the frame lifted, clearing just enough to reveal the corner where Keanu and Sandra had stood earlier. Maria held her breath as the camera stabilized. Keanu took a full breath inward, bracing himself. Sandra's hand instinctively moved toward her chest. And there, just faintly but clearly enough, the screen captured the moment when Keanu leaned close to Sandra and whispered into her ear. The audio was muffled, almost non-existent, but the closeness, the intimacy, the emotional weight of the moment, it was all visible. Then the footage shook again, as if Mark glanced away nervously, but the moment was already caught on camera. Maria's eyes widened slightly, not in judgment, but in shock. She looked up at them with a seriousness that told them she understood immediately how delicate this was. "This," Maria whispered, holding the camera slightly away from her body, "this could cause a storm if it gets out." Sandra exhaled slowly, her eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and vulnerability. "Maria, we need your help," she said gently, her voice soft but full of truth. "This moment wasn't meant for anyone else." Keanu nodded beside her. "We don't want to hide anything wrong, we just want time. This is personal." Maria stared at them, then at the screen again. She had worked in the industry long enough to recognize when something required sensitivity instead of authority. She lowered the camera slowly. "I understand," she said, "but we need to figure out how to handle this. This footage was technically captured during production. It might already be backed up automatically." Mark's face went pale. "I didn't mean—" Maria raised a hand gently to stop him. "I know you didn't, but we have a situation now." Sandra felt a tremor move through her chest. "Is there a way to check if it's been uploaded?" Maria nodded. "Yes, but only the tech desk can confirm it. And if it has been uploaded, we need to act fast before someone else opens the file out of curiosity." Keanu ran a hand through his hair slowly, the weight of the situation pressing deeper. "Maria, can you take us there? We need to see it before anyone else does." Maria hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me, but keep your heads down. The last thing we need is attention right now." They moved quickly down the hallway, Sandra walking beside Keanu, her shoulder brushing his gently with each hurried step. He didn't reach for her hand, but she could feel the steady calm in him, the same calm that kept her from falling apart completely. As they approached the tech monitoring room, Maria turned back to them with a warning in her eyes. Once we open that system, we'll know the truth. Either the footage is safe here in the camera, or it's already on the server, waiting for someone to find it. Sandra swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. And if it's on the server? Maria looked at her with honesty. Then we have very little time before someone sees it. Keanu felt Sandra's breath hitch beside him, and without thinking, he stepped a little closer, offering silent reassurance through presence alone. Maria opened the door to the tech room. Inside, 2 screens were glowing, one of them showing the auto-upload queue with a list of new files. And there, third from the top, was a clip titled, Hallway Candid 09 Unedited, MP4. Sandra froze. Keanu's jaw tightened. Maria whispered, this file was uploaded 10 minutes ago before we even saw Mark. And then the worst part. The file was marked processing, awaiting review, which meant someone else on the team could open it at any moment. Sandra felt her breath collapse inside her chest, her voice barely escaping. Keanu, it's already up there. And before anyone could move, the screen blinked. A notification appeared. File opened by user, Media Editor 01. Someone had just pressed play the moment the notification flashed across the screen. The room seemed to shrink into a tight, breathless space. The small words on the monitor, file opened by user, Media Editor 01, felt louder than any sound in the building. Sandra's heartbeat thudded painfully in her chest, and Keanu stepped closer to her without even thinking, his instinct to protect her rising almost instantly. Maria moved quickly toward the keyboard, her fingers hovering anxiously as she tried to understand how much control they still had over the situation. The tech room was colder than the rest of the production area, with humming servers stacked along the walls and cables running across the floor like restless veins. Screens glowed in soft blue and white, reflecting against Sandra's face, making her skin appear even more tense and pale. Keanu noticed how tight her breathing had become, how her shoulders trembled ever so slightly, and he felt something inside him twist gently. He never wanted his truth to bring her stress or fear. He had whispered those words from a place of sincerity and deep respect, not knowing fate would twist the moment into something dangerous. Sandra stared at the monitor, her voice barely holding together. Someone is watching it right now. Keanu nodded slowly, placing a steady hand on the back of her shoulder, offering warmth without pressure. We'll handle it, he said softly. Maria's voice broke the silence, sharp but controlled. We need to find out who Media Editor 01 is. If there's someone trustworthy, maybe we can contain this before it spreads. Mark, still pale from guilt, stepped forward. I think it's Jard, he whispered. He's one of the senior editors. He handles the backstage clips for social media. Sandra closed her eyes tightly for a moment, her chest lifting with a deep, uneasy breath. He's the one who decides what goes online. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we need to talk to him right now. Maria nodded and quickly grabbed her headset, calling for someone on the production floor. Her voice was calm but urgent. Locate Jard immediately. Tell him I need him in the tech room now. It's an emergency. While they waited, Sandra stepped away from the screen, placing her hands on the edge of a desk, trying to steady herself. Keanu followed quietly, stopping beside her but giving her enough space to breathe. She looked at him, her eyes glassy, filled with too many emotions fighting for space. I wasn't ready for this, she whispered. He lowered his head slightly, his voice quiet with regret. I'm sorry, I didn't think anything like this would happen. She shook her head, tears gathering but refusing to fall. It's not your fault. Your words weren't wrong. They just weren't supposed to be seen. He watched her with gentleness, the kind that always softened her heart. I know, he murmured, and whatever happens, I'm here with you. Before she could respond, the door swung open and Jard entered, slightly out of breath, confused and unaware of the emotional storm waiting for him. He was holding a tablet in one hand, his glasses slightly crooked from rushing. Maria, what's going on? He asked. Maria stepped forward with purpose. Jard, you opened a file on the server just a minute ago, a hallway candid clip. We need to discuss it immediately. Jard blinked, surprised. Oh yeah, the file was unnamed, so I opened it to label it for later. I wasn't really. But then he stopped talking, because as he looked up, he noticed Keanu and Sandra standing together, both wearing expressions filled with worry and vulnerability. He froze, instantly understanding the weight of the situation. Wait, Jard said slowly, lowering the tablet. That clip, was it something private? Keanu stepped forward slightly. Yes, very private. Sandra clasped her hands together tightly. We didn't know Mark recorded us. It wasn't meant for anyone. We need to know exactly what you saw. Jard swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. I only watched a few seconds, enough to see you two talking closely. Then I paused it when I got the call to come here. I didn't watch the whole thing. There was a long silence. Maria pressed carefully. Did you hear anything? Jard shook his head quickly. No, the audio was muffled. I couldn't hear words. I only saw the moment when Keanu leaned in. It looked personal. Sandra closed her eyes again, relief and tension mixing into a painful blend. So you didn't hear the whisper? No, Jard said softly, but I could see it meant something. Keanu rubbed the back of his neck, his voice filled with calm but carrying underlying urgency. Jard, we need your help. This footage can't be shared, not now, not when things are so raw and fragile. This is something that belongs between us. Jard looked at him, then at Sandra, and his expression softened. He wasn't just an editor. He was a person who had grown up admiring their work, respecting their kindness, their humility in an industry often full of ego. Seeing them vulnerable made him understand the responsibility he now held. I won't share it, Jard said firmly. I'll delete it from the server. Sandra's breath loosened slightly, but not fully, and from the camera. Maria lifted the device. We'll wipe it completely. Jard nodded. I'll clear it from backups too. No one else has seen it yet. You have my word. The relief that washed through the room was heavy but incomplete. Sandra looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Jard offered a sympathetic nod. You both have always treated everyone here with respect. The last thing I'd ever want is to expose something personal. But then something unexpected happened. The hallway outside filled with sudden noise, rushing footsteps, hushed voices, and the unmistakable energy of something shifting rapidly. Maria turned toward the door with confusion. What now? A production assistant burst in a second later, panic in her eyes. Maria, we have a problem. Everyone tensed again instantly. What problem? Maria asked. The assistant held up a phone, her hands shaking. Someone posted a blurry backstage photo on social media. It's going viral. People think it's Keanu leaning in to kiss Sandra. Sandra felt her stomach drop. Keanu took a sharp breath. Jard looked devastated. It wasn't from the footage, I swear. I know, Maria said quickly. This is something else. The assistant continued, voice trembling. Somebody from the backstage crowd must have snapped it with their phone. The angle is bad, but it looks intimate. Now fans and media accounts are reposting it everywhere. Keanu's expression tightened with worry. How long ago was it posted? 10 minutes, the assistant replied, and it's spreading fast. Sandra stepped away from the desk, her hand covering her mouth slightly as reality sank in. So even though the video is contained, the picture is out. Keanu moved closer to her, his voice quiet but steady. Sandra, we'll figure this out. We'll face it together. But her eyes filled with emotional turmoil. People will twist it, Keanu. They'll create stories. They'll make it something it was. Or something it was, he said gently. She looked up at him, shocked by the honesty in his voice. Keanu, I still don't know how to process what you whispered. Now the world thinks something happened before I've even understood my own feelings. He nodded slowly, his expression full of patience. I know, and I'm not asking you to decide anything. I don't want to force anything on you or rush you or pressure you. I just told you the truth I've carried for years. She looked away, her emotions tightening into a knot. But now the world is stepping into something personal, something I wasn't ready to explore yet. Keanu took a deep, quiet breath. Then we fight for your space, for your peace, whatever it takes. Maria stepped closer, urgency filling her tone. You two need to prepare. The press team will call soon. They're already asking for statements. Sandra's voice broke slightly. Statements about what? Maria's eyes softened. About the photo, and about whatever the public thinks is happening between you two. Sandra felt dizzy for a moment, overwhelmed by how quickly things had spiraled. She wasn't ready for the world's eyes, not when she was still unsure of her own heart. Keanu saw the fear in her eyes and gently placed his hand near hers on the desk, not touching but close enough for her to feel his presence. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to say." She nodded slowly. "But we can't stay silent either. Silence makes the noise louder." Maria straightened. "Give me an hour to speak with the studio, but you both need to think about what message you want to send, because after tonight the world will ask questions." Sandra inhaled deeply, feeling a trembling inside her chest. When she finally looked at Keanu, her voice came out soft and fragile. "Keanu, before we talk to anyone else, before we say anything to the world, I need to know something." He stepped closer, his eyes gentle. "Anything." She swallowed hard. "Did you whisper those words because of something you feel now, or something you've been hiding for a long time?" The room fell silent, and Keanu's expression shifted, soft, emotional, vulnerable. He opened his mouth to answer. But before he could speak, Maria's headset crackled loudly, and a frantic voice shouted through the line. "Maria, emergency, a major news outlet just published the photo. They're claiming Keanu and Sandra had a secret moment backstage. It's everywhere. You need to see this." Sandra turned toward the sound, her heart dropping again. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of a truth that was no longer theirs alone. And the cliffhanger deepened as the screen refreshed with breaking headlines. The room fell into a heavy silence as Maria turned her tablet toward them. The headline glowed in bright red across the screen, sharp and loud even though no sound came from it. Sandra stared at the photo, blurry, poorly lit, taken from an angle that did not tell the truth, yet it still made her heart clench. The picture captured the split second when Keanu had leaned toward her to whisper, his face close, her eyes full of emotion. But without the context, without the honesty behind it, the image looked like something else entirely. Something the world would twist and reshape until it barely resembled the truth. Keanu stepped closer, studying the headline with calm but serious eyes. He felt responsible, not because he had done something wrong, but because his truth had created a ripple in Sandra's life that she had not been ready for. He watched her carefully, noticing the way her breath grew shallow, the way her fingers tightened around the edge of the desk, the way her emotions trembled just beneath the surface. "They don't even know what they're talking about," Maria said softly, frustration in her voice. "But that won't stop them. This will spread everywhere." Sandra took a slow breath and whispered, "I'm not ready for this." Keanu moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "We'll get through it. You're not alone in this." She looked up at him, her eyes full of vulnerability. "But I still don't understand what this moment is. How can the world have opinions about something I haven't even had time to feel yet?" He hesitated, his voice quiet when he finally spoke. "Then let me give you the space to feel it. Whatever you need, time, distance, quiet, I'll protect that for you." She shook her head gently, looking down. "You whispered something that changed everything for me tonight. I don't know whether to run from it or move toward it." He nodded slowly. "I understand." Maria cleared her throat softly, trying to handle her side of the crisis with as much respect as possible. "The press team is asking what message you want to send. They need to know if you want to deny the story, ignore it, or respond with something vague." Sandra's breath trembled. "But what do we say?" Keanu looked at Maria and then at Sandra. "Before we say anything to the world, Sandra deserves the truth, fully, without cameras, without headlines." Maria nodded and quietly stepped out, giving them the privacy they needed. The tech room door closed softly, leaving Sandra and Keanu in a quiet space lit only by the soft glow of the monitors. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside was rushing, posting, speculating, distorting, but inside the room, time slowed, giving them a rare chance to breathe. Finally, Sandra spoke, her voice raw and sincere. "Keanu, what did your whisper really mean? I know the words you said, but I don't know the heart behind them." He took a deep breath, not rushing, not hiding, simply letting himself be honest. "I whispered that I never stopped caring for you, not as a memory, not as a moment from the past, but as something that stayed with me. Something that kept growing quietly, even when life moved too fast for either of us to look at it." She stared at him, stunned by the softness and courage in his confession. He continued, each word steady and gentle. "I didn't say it to change your life. I didn't say it to ask for anything. I said it because carrying it inside started to feel dishonest, and because you deserve honesty from me even if it leads nowhere, even if it complicates everything." Her eyes softened with something between relief and ache. "And you felt this way for how long?" His gaze held hers with quiet truth. "For years, not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, patient way. The kind of caring that doesn't demand, doesn't push, doesn't take. It just exists. And I whispered it tonight because I realized there may never be a perfect moment. There's only the one that feels honest." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't bother to hide it. "Keanu, I don't know what to do with that. I care about you deeply too, but my heart moves slower than my mind, and tonight everything happened so fast." He stepped a little closer, just enough for her to feel the sincerity radiating from him. "You don't have to do anything. You don't have to answer anything. Your pace is your pace, and I respect it completely." She nodded, wiping her tears slowly. "But the world thinks they already know what this moment means." Keanu gave a small, soft smile. "The world always thinks it knows everything, but only we know the truth." She looked away, exhaling shakily. "So what do we do now?" He spoke gently. "We tell the truth, not the full truth, not the personal truth, just the truth the world needs to hear. Something that protects your heart, respects our moment, and doesn't feed the noise." She looked at him with a question in her eyes. "And what truth is that?" But before he could answer, Maria returned quietly, knocking softly on the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said in a careful tone, "but the press team needs your decision within the next few minutes. The longer we wait, the more the story grows." Keanu looked at Sandra, waiting for her to speak first. He didn't want to decide for her. He wanted whatever step they took to be something she felt safe with. Sandra took a long, trembling breath, then nodded slowly. "We're ready." Maria entered with her tablet open to a draft statement. "We can say the photo is being misunderstood, or we can simply say you two were rehearsing a moment for the show, or we can say nothing at all." Sandra looked at Keanu again, and this time her eyes held clarity instead of fear. "I think we should tell them it was a personal conversation, not romantic, not dramatic, just personal, something that wasn't meant for cameras." Keanu smiled softly, approving the courage behind her words. "And that we ask for privacy." Sandra added, her voice steady, "and that we respect each other deeply. That's enough." Maria nodded, simple, honest, protective. She typed quickly, then read the message aloud. "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock shared a private, personal conversation backstage. The moment has been misunderstood due to a blurred photo taken without permission. They ask for respect and privacy as the situation is clarified. There is no further comment at this time." Sandra nodded, "Yes, that's enough." Keanu nodded too, "Thank you, Maria." Maria sent the message to the press team immediately. Within minutes, the official statement went public. As expected, the internet exploded with theories, debates, and emotional reactions. Some believed them, some didn't. Some respected their privacy, some wanted more. But none of that mattered now because the truth, their truth, was still safe, held gently between them. After the chaos settled slightly, Sandra and Keanu stepped outside onto a quiet balcony behind the studio. The night air was cool, brushing softly against their skin. The city lights flickered below them, scattered like tiny stars that had fallen to earth. They stood side by side, breathing in the much-needed silence. After a long pause, Sandra whispered, "Thank you for being gentle with me tonight." Keanu looked at her with that steady warmth she had always trusted. "Thank you for listening." She turned her head slightly, her eyes still carrying the echoes of the night. "What happens now?" He gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Now we take our time, we let the world quiet down, and we talk when you're ready, really talk." She nodded, the tension easing from her shoulders. "I want that, maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon." He nodded softly. "That's all I ever wanted, the chance to talk." For the first time that night, Sandra smiled, a real, gentle smile that reached her eyes. "And Keanu," she whispered, "about what you said, I didn't run from it, I just need space to walk toward it." The warmth in his chest was quiet but deep. "I'll walk at your pace," he said. They stood quietly together, breathing the same calm air, letting the night settle around them like a soft blanket. The world outside continued to buzz with noise and speculation, but on that balcony there was only truth, respect, and a fragile new beginning. Whatever happened next would be shaped by honesty instead of fear. And for the first time in years, something unspoken between them finally had room to grow.